Today, Meet the Press Daily. Good evening. I'm Chuck Todd here in Washington. President Trump didn't want America to be the world's police. Well, we got to ask this question. Is this what it looks like when there is no American cop on the beat? There are clashes in Hong Kong between pro-democracy protesters and riot police. There are decades-old tensions reemerging between Japan and South Korea. At a moment, they should be focused on North Korea. There are populist, nativist, and xenophobic movements roiling the globe. There is escalating conflict between two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan. Russia is testing nuclear-powered missiles. There is now a Russian missile technology inside Turkey, a key NATO ally. And I haven't even mentioned just sort of your run-in-the-mill sort of walking away from certain things when it comes to whether it's Middle East peace, parts of Latin America, and things like that. Folks, any other modern president would be at least voicing support for pro-democracy movements, especially ones where some demonstrators are singing our national anthem, like we've seen in Hong Kong. By the way, I didn't even bring up the democracy protest movements we have nothing to say about in Russia. But President Trump is keeping his distance. In fact, a top administration official today actually said the Hong Kong matter is an internal matter for China. Any other modern president would also be strenuously opposing disinformation campaigns or condemning missile launches or rebuking allies for weakening the NATO alliance or trying to ease tensions in Kashmir or trying to ease tensions between Japan and South Korea, tamping down xenophobic movements. Instead, the message this American president is sending to foreign governments is, look, it's your business if you want to crack down on protesters or journalists or inflame nuclear tensions or sow disinformation. That's your business. But as the New York Times notes, the inability or unwillingness of Washington to help diffuse the flashpoints is one of the clearest signs yet of the erosion of American power and global influence under Mr. Trump. We'll turn to some experts on this conversation. We're going to start with David Ignatius, Washington Post Associate Editor, Foreign Affairs columnist, who has a terrific piece today that is ringing in my ear for sure on this topic. Jason Johnson is politics editor at TheRoot.com. Betsy Woodruff is a politics reporter for the Daily Beast, and Michael Steele, a former RNC chair. All of them are MSNBC contributors. David, I want to start with you because this has been one of those, we've been talking about this inside our own newsroom for quite some time, going, you know, there's this giant foreign policy problem sitting at the president's desk, but it's hard to articulate because the problem is inaction. The problem isn't action. You did a good job of articulating it in this big picture, but this isn't the easiest story to explain to the public. Explain what we mean here by inaction.
So, Chuck, it is a complicated world. Today is a day when we felt as if the world was on fire. But it's a day when I was reminded that President Trump's response to the world, to this complicated, difficult world, from the day he took office, has basically been retreat and retrenchment. His preferred instrument in dealing with countries he doesn't like is to slap them with tariffs or economic sanctions. He expresses no commitment to the traditional American role of leadership, of moral guidance. He doesn't stand with protesters in Hong Kong or, it seems, anywhere else. And I do think we're seeing today, it's a day to watch it, the consequences of those 2 years of retrenchment, of America first, of selfish policies that don't really stand for anything larger than our own particular national interest. What really bothered me in my column this morning, the central theme, is where are the Democrats? Here is a perfect opening for the Democrats to offer an alternative vision. As I said this morning, we need a little more JFK leaning out into this troubled world and a little less Democrats repeating they don't want to have anything to do with trade agreements, that they're as protectionist as Donald Trump. That's not the right answer, especially today.
David, let me do what some may push back on when they hear all of us arguing this sort of, well, America, whether we like it or not, we are the world's policemen. They may push back and say, to what end has that worked out well? We lost blood and treasure in Iraq, blood and treasure in Afghanistan. These places, whether we were involved or not, they're fighting anyway. Why should we get involved, right? That is the Donald Trump foreign policy philosophy. And frankly, that is probably where 40% of the country sit on these issues.
So the people are right that this is not a moment when we should engage in the sense of looking for new wars overseas. I've been thinking the last couple weeks, attending conferences about China and the threat the rising China poses. The answer to that Chinese challenge is to get our own house in order. Every theme that Democrats express in this campaign, improving our schools, making ourselves a more inclusive, diverse, welcoming country, makes sense in particular in the context of having a stronger country and political system that works push back against a rising China that through the rest of our lifetimes, you and me and our children too, is going to be probably the biggest thing we have to worry about. So it's not that we want to go back to JFK, pay any price, with troops all over the world. It's to begin solving the problems, being stronger and more unified, and then being able to compete better.
All right, I want to unpack two things that you've introduced here with these folks here. One is the China story, and I want to get to that in a second. But, Michael, let me start with you. If there is one rhetorical area left that Republicans will contradict this president on, it is apparently it is still foreign policy. Here's Kevin McCarthy, who is basically with Trump now on most things. And he says, to the thousands of young people in Hong Kong who are speaking up for human rights and speaking out against the Communist Party of China, we see you waving the American flag, and we hear you singing our national anthem. America stands for freedom. America stands with Hong Kong. That is the House minority leader of the Republican Party, not the President of the United States.
So? I mean,
does this matter? That
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because, first off, it's the majority leader is not the President of the United States. So, whether you have Lindsey Graham or Kevin McCarthy or any of these others out there, and we love them to fill the space with that noise, but it matters that the President is not with them. On this. He's not leading with that. That wasn't his tweet. That was that was not the president's tweet. If the president had tweeted that, we'd be in a whole different conversation right now, and I think the world would look at this a little differently.
Betsy, that seems to be, it is, this Republican Party, we know they don't like the tariff front. They've decided not to say anything. They don't like his foreign policy, but they don't know how to criticize him.
There's a slightly higher comfort level within the GOP when it comes to that. And in this case, what we see from McCarthy is not him going after the president, but rather just saying something that doesn't directly contradict or push back against what the president said. And part of the reason that this conversation is important and that Republicans are at odds with the president in many ways, particularly members like Marco Rubio, is that the issue in Hong Kong is predominantly about democracy and human rights. And when it comes to Trump's foreign policy, with a couple exceptions, those are very low on the priority list.
American exceptionalism. I keep coming back to this phrase because I wanted to make the whole thing about America. Right? When I hear the phrase American exceptionalism, it means, we're the ones that identify the good guys and punish the bad guys.
They're not just singing the national anthem in China. They're singing songs from Hamilton, right? They're singing, Can You Hear the People Sing? Like, that is literally what they're singing. They are basically...
That's Les Mis. Sorry. But I'll be in the room where it happened.
Right. This is the point where the real danger here, and the president not speaking up, is when that vacuum is open, then these democracy forces, right, they become radicalized. Right. They're waiting for us to come in and say, look, we have your back. We may not be able to
push things a little bit farther now because we're there.
Yes, we're there. We're there. If you have dissidents, we'll take them if they have to flee the country. If we don't step in and provide that role, these things become much more violent and dangerous.
David, can you explain, I don't think it's an accident that Modi did what he did in India with Kashmir. I don't think it's an accident what we've seen with Japan and South Korea, where a decades-old is coming back, that without an American president to be there to lean on. I'm thinking about doing this, Modi, let's not, I'm in the middle of trying to get out of Afghanistan. We got a lot of things going on here. I don't need this now, right? How much of this do you think is happening because of we've just walked away for now?
When an American president is not prepared to be a forward-leaning global leader, mischief happens. In an America first world where the organizing principle of foreign policy is just selfishness, India is going to decide, Modi's going to decide India first. He's going to go after his traditional view that Kashmir must be suppressed. You're going to find that all over the world. People will put their own small national interests first, and Donald Trump simply isn't a credible arbiter. In the case of India and its moves in Kashmir, I have a particular worry that Donald Trump helped get this going with some very imprudent, off-the-cuff comments during the visit of the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, which kind of gratuitously threw out the idea that we'd be a moderator. It's something I need to do more reporting on. But the basic point that you make, that when we don't have strong American leadership, you know, Japan and South Korea fall into their traditional national rivalry, and there's no America that's a credible peacekeeper, if you will, not militarily, but diplomatically.
All right, I'm going to dig deeper in this conversation on the political side of things with Ben Rhodes, like how did the Democrats do this? Betsy, is it worth them making this case or not? Because there are a lot of people like, no, focus on home, focus domestic. You know, maybe they don't want America first, but they want your eye on the domestic ball.
The reality is that most American swing voters are not going to vote based on what's happening in Hong Kong. They didn't vote based on what was happening in Burma at the tail end of the Obama administration. They aren't really going to vote based on the Iran deal. But what this provides as an opportunity for these Democratic candidates is a moment to be part of this national conversation and to present more of a contrast with the president. So even though they probably aren't going to see their poll numbers change in South Carolina or Iowa based on the messages and the tweets that they put out about Hong Kong, what they can do is paint a more stark picture of how the United States would work differently under their leadership.
All right, but Jason, I am curious, I think this China issue is complicated for Democrats. They don't know how to basically say, he's mismanaging it, even though we agree we got to get tough on China. Like, okay, like, you're at least on the same side. Like, it's hard.
The people who aren't working at the Chevy Cruise station in Youngstown, Ohio, don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that level of nuance and detail right now. Right. Really, this is only an opportunity I see for Mayor Pete or Joe Biden, because they're the foreign policy guys.
That's what we hear. But Mayor Pete would love this debate right now.
Exactly. They are the two who can step forward and say, look, I have experience in this area. I've been vice president. I've served overseas, et cetera, et cetera. This is a hot potato for the rest of the Democrats, and given some of their own weaknesses, I don't think they'd want to touch it.
The other point of entry for Democrats is that they can very easily say, our party traditionally agrees with Trump on the China trade stuff, and when it comes to human rights, they can actually position themselves as tougher on China than Trump. It's the only sector.
I think you laid it out just now. I mean, we support this effort to rein China in. Here's the limit of that, and lack leadership beyond that by this president is causing these particular problems, so they can identify that, just step into the game.
David, I'm going to ask you the question that you may feel as if, how dare, it is impossible to answer, but where does Hong Kong go next?
Well, so there have been signs that the protesters realize they may have gone too far, maybe alienating support in Hong Kong by some recent actions. I think China is going to be very reluctant to send troops. The troops have been massing just over the border, but I've been talking here at a conference in La Jolla, California, with experts who know everything about China and Hong Kong, and they say China is going to be very careful. The one point I'd make about Trump's statements, there's a moral hazard problem here. We don't want to imply to those protesters in the streets that we'll come in to help them if the troops come out, because that's clearly not true. But we do want to say that the world is watching, that these disputes should be solved without resort to force. That's a standard line for an American president, and I honestly have been shocked that President Trump has not said that basic thing. He's almost seemed to be inviting them to come in and crack down. He needs to say the world is watching. We expect this to be resolved without violence. And you know, I think those students that singing the American songs, that will really resonate in the campaign if Trump doesn't do something.
Boy, it's interesting you say that. It does feel as if he almost wants to bait the Chinese to overstep. All right, David Ignatius. Like I said, you laid this out as well as anybody has laid this out. So get over to the Washington Post.
Thanks, Chuck. Thank you.
And go check it out. Thank you, David. Jason, Betsy, and Michael, you guys are sticking around up ahead. Democrats on the campaign trail, we just talked about this. They've been blasting the president for his response to Hong Kong.